Well, good evening, everybody, and I've got a very, very special guest tonight, Howard Cox, who has been doing this sort of stuff. Not that he's older than me, but he's been doing this sort of stuff for a very, very long time. Howard, you're very welcome to the show. As everybody can see, Fair Fuel UK, that is why you guys don't pay massive, well, we all pay massive fuel duty, but that's why fuel duty has been frozen for 15 years. The man on the screen next to me, you can thank Howard Cox for fuel duty in the UK, been frozen for 15 years. Howard has over 1.7 million followers of his website, and that is a lot of pressure to bring to bear to the Chancellor of the Exchequer. And every time a Chancellor thinks about raising fuel duty, he's looking in the rearview mirror, metaphorically, and going, there's 1.7 million people ain't going to vote for us if I raise this fuel duty. So Howard, tell us how you came to be doing Fair Fuel. Tell us all about yourself. But let's start with Fair Fuel and how you got to that stage where you're actually directly influencing every single government of whatever shade for the last 15 years.
Well, thank you, Richard, for having me on. I mean, it's a pleasure and it's an honour to be with you, mate. And I've got huge respect for what you've done and what you're doing.
It's mutual.
And keep it going, my friend. So, yeah, I mean, back in 2010, I was doing some small business consultancy, helping people trade through difficulties. I wasn't a cost cutter. I was a person that was actually trying to incentivize their markets to actually buy their product or whatever. But I was mainly small businesses. And I was working for a small haulage company that had about 50 trucks. And one day I was having a cup of tea with the CEO in his office, which was a porter cabin, bless him. And I was just looking over his desk, and I was very good at reading upside down. His spreadsheet, there was a line that said fuel. And I said, is that really your fuel costs? He said, oh, that's my fuel costs every month, yeah. And he said, I said, can I just work out a percentage? It was 47% of his costs went on diesel.
Yeah.
And I said, you're kidding me. And at that time, 70% went to the government. Yeah. And so you're just thinking, yet another tax that a person has, a business has to pay for, and all of us, of course. But yeah. I said, what's people doing about this? He said, well, the Road Haulage Association and the Freight Transport Association, now called Logistics UK, they write a letter to the Chancellor every year, say, please don't put up fuel duty or something like that. People like Edmund King he's worth about £750,000 in stock options and salary. And the RAC, they got some wonderful PR people being paid huge amounts of money. What they were asking didn't touch the size, didn't do anything.
Yeah.
I said, well, what do you think we can do? He said, well, I don't know. I've been thinking about it. Cut a long story short, I'll jump straight to the point. Within 2 to 3 weeks, I managed to get the first debate in the House of Commons and on fuel duty. The e-petitions that Cameron started.
Yeah,
I got the first one.
Wow.
And that's now they're a bit cheap, and everyone seems to want to do a petition. But then it was a new one, and I also got something like about 30 backbench Tory MPs on side too. I also helped set up an all-party parliamentary group. I became secretary to it. So I was hitting right at the heart of everything. And as that debate, that 100,000 signatures reached, they debated it. It went further and further and further. And at the time, Osborne was the Chancellor of Exchequer. Cameron was, I think we had a coalition, didn't we, around that time as well?
Yeah, Clegg and Cameron, yeah.
And to cut a long story short, I got a lot of respect because I didn't go for direct action, which is blocking roads, which happened. Some of the people watching this will remember the 2000 truck blockades. And it's all very well. They were quite successful. But the point is, it basically pissed off people not going to work and things like that. And the best way to do it is to do it objectively. And I also managed to prove through raising some money, and it was very difficult to do at the time. But I did get backing from the RAC and the FTA and the RHA. I brought them all together. So we got cars and trucks together, White Van Man together, their organisations. And I did manage to get some funds to actually put together a analytical economic report that proved that if you increase fuel duty, you destroy the economy. And if you reduce it, you increase growth. And let's face it, every 37 million motorists in this country, 37 million, I remind people about that, of which about 750,000 are driving pure electric. Quite a few people are driving hybrids now, but in essence, fossil fuels are paramount to our economy. any time we announce or the government announces inflation figures, you usually get the next sentence. Well, that's because fuel pump prices at pumps have gone up or gone down, and those sorts of things. So it's so influential. Well, anyway, I managed to convince them for a long, long time, and every year I thought, oh my God, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, and every year we got a freeze, and in fact we got a penny decrease in the first year. In fact, Osborne was really upset because the dollar was quite strong, the pound's weak, and oil was priced in dollars, so that penny decrease didn't really register. But equally, I managed to convince quite recently Rishi Sunak about the business of we'll come on to it a bit later, the 2030 ban, how damaging that would be to the economy, and we actually cut it by 5p fuel duty. So in essence, since I've started, fuel duty's come down 10%. We always say it's a freeze, but it's come down by 10% since 2010. Had it carried on with what was at the time a thing called the fuel price escalator, which was basically 2p plus inflation, every year fuel duty would go up. We'd be paying somewhere around about £2.50 now for petrol and probably nearer £3 for diesel.
Yeah.
That's Hong Kong prices, by the way. They're the most expensive in the world.
Yeah.
But we're still the highest tax diesel drivers in the world, even after the work I've done. And diesel is the commercial heartbeat of any economy. And I just don't understand. I still don't understand it. Why, when backbenchers totally agree with me, even Labour backbenchers agree totally with it, as soon as they get into government, they want to put it up.
I saw that on the site. I mean, going on the 2030 thing. I mean, obviously the fuel duty is one thing, and it's brilliant what you've done on that. And I mean, what really fascinates me, Howard, is, and again, you know, I've been on channels with you before. We've never really dug into exactly how you got the influence that you did, and that's what I find fascinating. How did you manage to end up chairing an all-party common select committee? That I think I was going to say as a civilian, but as a non-MP, it's great. How did you manage to get that influence?
Well, remember, it's not a select committee. That's just for MPs.
Oh, sorry,
it's an all-party parliamentary group.
Sure, yeah.
I wasn't chair of it. I was secretary to it.
Secretary, okay, yeah.
The chairs of it have been people like the brilliant Robert Halfon, the Essex MP, who's a dear friend. We've had also the Barnet Lord, Craig McKinley. He was for many time. You know, he's the guy that had all his limbs due to sepsis. They were removed.
Yep. Yeah.
We've had Saki Bhatti. We've had. I mean, I'm very close to people like Priti Patel, was Penny Mordaunt, and people like that. So front bench people who basically recognise that in their constituency. And let me repeat: 1.7 million divided by 650 seats. That means every seat there's over 2,000 people that back Fair Fuel UK. And if you've got a small marginal seat, less than 2,000, I have a bit of influence on who the voting thing. So that's the way it works. The important thing, Richard, and sorry to butt in here, but the most important thing here is to get people to talk to their MP. So when it came up to a financial statement or a budget, about 3 weeks beforehand, I sent out a templated email, which for my supporters to use a particular thing called an advocacy emailing system, whereby they just type in their postcode, and up comes their MP, and they can send that templated letter. And that's been really the heart of the success, combined with top people, top economists saying everything. There's no point in lying about things. There's so much lies go on into policy, and we can probably come to that a bit later. I know we will. But from the point of view, if you cut fuel duty, if you cut it, you put more money in people's pocket, inflation comes down, businesses can invest in more cleaner kit because they got more money to spend. They can also invest in more staff, they can train staff, etc., etc. And good old Mrs. Bloggs can go to a medical appointment about her back, with her little Fiat 500 petrol thing that does, or a diesel version, which does 70 to the gallon. Leave it alone. That's the sort of thing we can do. So I got the emotive thing. I also got teamed up with the Sun. I did a lot of articles I wrote for the Sun. It's interesting how the Sun have not been so keen on me recently because I joined Reform, and yet they're now all over Nigel Farage and loving him. That's the press for you, as we all know.
Well, the press are a little bit behind the curve, aren't they? Unfortunately, I mean, the mainstream media is probably a year behind all the rest of us that are doing online journalism and what we're doing now, which is another thing. But I think that's fascinating. How, I mean, what we'll not do it on this video, but I think we need to talk again about how we can do that with ideas like the pledge, and these different ideas that are really about saving the UK. I mean, it's obviously what you've done is vital for the road haulage industry and every single motorist. But the game that we're in now, which is literally the salvation of the country and politically, if we can, I think we need to pick your brains on how we can, because we've got the problem is, Howard, and again, we'll come back onto this later again, but the problem is we've still got 3.5 years before we can even think about getting this lot out. And we need to find ways of influencing the game before we actually, and I said before we came on, I'm going to say this, guys, this is a very bold thing to say, and I may have a very red face in 2029, but I believe Advance UK are going to win the next general election. And I know you're all going to go mad and say, who are Advance UK? We've never even heard of them. Just wait and see. Just wait and see. I'm not a prophet or a son of a prophet, but I just believe it's true. Anyway, but so Howard, tell us about 2030. What's going to happen in 2030? And why should everybody in the chat be looking? By the way, before you do that, Howard, guys, like and share this. We want to get a really big viewer figures on this because, you know, Howard is, you know, you don't often get guests like Howard on this show. So let's get this shared everywhere and get some really, really big viewer figures. So yeah, tell us about 2030, Howard. What's happening with 2030 and why should the people in the chat be concerned about it?
Well, I'll give a bit of history about it because there's a certain Prime Minister called Boris Johnson. You may have heard of him. We all know what Boris did, but one day Boris woke up and we had this. He decided to introduce a ban of new fossil fuel driven diesel and petrol cars to be basically banned. And he chose first of all 2040. I was against that as well, but it's sort of, when you look at it now, it's sort of acceptable. Not very though. And then he decided, woke up another morning, probably what's her name, Princess Nutmeg or whatever her name. You know, his wife. She probably said, "Oh, we need to get rid of the cars." So he moved it to 2035, and very quickly he moved it to 2030. And then, wow! And I produced this report, and that was with the Alliance of British Drivers, the Motorcycle Action Group, and myself. We joined up, put money into actually the Centre of Economic Business Research, a brilliant economic. The chairman is a good friend of mine, the ex-chairman Douglas McWilliams. I must put a plug in for him. He is so close to common sense, you can't believe it, in terms of life and generally. But he's a very powerful economist. In fact, he advised George Osborne. That's how he goes back. And to cut a long story short, he produced a report, and it's totally independent. I didn't know what's going to happen now. It's come out, and he showed that the cost of the 2030 ban is 5 times more than the benefits. So just think about that. So if I always use this little analogy that, imagine if I'm a little spad and go into my minister's office and said, "I've got this idea." He said, if we ban all these cars in 2030, we make all these benefits. He said, "Oh, great, that's good. Oh, by the way, how much would it cost?" "Oh, that's the problem. It's going to cost us 5 times more than what we benefit out of it." And and Rishi Sunak saw that report. Well, I presented it to him, sent it to him, and I did lots of presentations. I have lots of receptions in Portcullis House. You work with MPs, you can get room and space in there. You work with the press. That was spread everywhere to say that. And to be fair to Rishi Sunak, not only did he cut fuel duty by 5t, he moved it back to 2035. But in comes Starmer, and he's moved it back to 2030. And an old Ed Miliband, you know, he's the guy that is actually running rife through our lives, and he's the one that's going to bankrupt us all.
Oh yeah.
The interesting thing is that if you actually work out the figures of actually what the 2030 ban will cost for every household up until then, it will cost £14,000 a year.
14 grand a year.
Yeah, that's what it will cost every household if you actually went through to the. It is astonishing figures and these sort of things. And these, guess what? The mainstream media that should be the headline. To be fair, the Sun, to some extent the Mail, and some extent the Telegraph, they did fair comment on that. I'm hoping to renew that report because things have changed a bit and etc. But at the end of the day, the most important thing about electric vehicles is they can't succeed unless they're subsidised.
Yep.
Or you get rid of the competition in 2030. You know, this is not a free market, is it?
It's crazy. Honestly, I mean, you know, again, it's something I'm very ignorant of. I'm not sure about this, the whole environmental thing. I don't fully understand it. I've read books that, you know, that say that actually more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is actually a good thing. It leads to global greening and all this sort of stuff. So I've looked at a little bit of it, but I'm not going to pretend that I know stuff I don't know. So I'm relying on the experts on this one, Howard. Richard, one
of the most important things to ask your your viewers, your wonderful viewers,
Yeah.
is this: how much CO2 is in the atmosphere now?
Yes. 21% or so, isn't it? I don't know.
No, it's 0.04%.
0.4. There you go. 0. Yeah, it's 21% oxygen.
And if we doubled that to 0.08%,
Yeah.
we'd have wonderful farms in the Sahara Desert.
Well, this is it. It's global greening. That was, I read a book by some guy called Lomberg, some Swedish guy, and he said, it's actually happening. There is global greening. So in other words, actually more carbon dioxide, because obviously plants take in carbon dioxide, basic biology, and they spit out oxygen. So that's basically what happens. So plants get more food.
It's called photosynthesis.
Photosynthesis.
And the interesting thing about it, all of our greenhouses in this country are supplied with artificial CO2 to bring on tomatoes and things like that. It's massive. And we go back to that whole thing about net zero. The UK, and this is what really pisses me off something big time, is that we generate something like 0.9% of all the emissions in the world. And it's CO2, which is, the so-called global greening, warming agent that they're talking about, 0.09%. We've actually gone down nearly 60% in the last 10 years on our emissions. We don't need to do any more. We've done enough. Get China and India and Brazil and America even to bring their emissions down, not us. And we're paying the price of it.
And that's if it is a genuine problem, which again, there's so much skepticism about whether even if temperatures rise by whatever it is that they're going to rise, 0. Whatever it is, is that going to be?
Bring it on. I want it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I couldn't believe that I was reading something. They were going to start spraying stuff in the air to block out the sunlight. I mean, did you hear that? That was a genuine thing that they were going to do.
No, they're doing it. It's not.
They're doing it.
We're doing it. They've been doing it for the last 10 years, and it's aluminium nitrate or whatever it is they spray into the air and that sort of thing, and it accumulates droplets in the air. They get heavier and we get rain. It's been going on for years of that sort of thing. And yes, I'm afraid it's not a conspiracy theory. They are spraying chemicals in the air which we breathe in. Okay.
Wow.
Okay. To actually water droplets to sort of amalgamate and fall. That's what they try and do.
That has just blown my mind, Howard. And this is why we need people like Howard on this channel, so that we can hear the stuff that I don't know anything about. You can ask me about immigration, Islam. I know all about that, but this is stuff I don't know about. And it's just, and that's what so, okay, how do we stop 2030 happening? Because I want to be, if I ever get any money again, I want to be able to go and buy the biggest diesel or petrol guzzling 4x4 with a 4-liter engine and just rip around the countryside like a lunatic in my second midlife crisis. So how can we stop it, Howard? How can we make sure I can buy my 4x4 in 5 years?
Well, the most important, one of our problems we got, you're looking at 4 or 5 years. That's the sort of time that car manufacturers actually build production lines. So we are really at the cusp. We've got to do something about it now. Now, I'm obviously, there's a budget coming up in the autumn, and I'm going to be working hard to keep fuel duty frozen. But I'm also asked causing a thing which I work with the Tory government with Claire Coutinho MP on producing a thing called Pump Watch.
She's excellent, by the way. She's excellent. She is. She's excellent. Other stuff as well. Yeah, she's really good. She's
a good friend, and she's actually given me some good testimonials, about what I've done, and I'm really proud of what she's done. But Pump Watch is that, don't forget, I just said about taxes, fuel duty, and don't forget VAT's on fuel duty, by the way. You've got 20% on that, so tax on a tax. And that's it's not illegal, but it's immoral. But the other thing, of course, is when oil goes up and etc., it goes up like a rocket at the pumps, and it comes down like a feather. The oil, you've heard that many times. Yeah. But the thing is, opportunistic profiteering is still rife. You go to a BP garage, it's probably something like, for the sake of argument, so it'd be 145. You go to a Merco garage, it's 139, and you go to some of the stuff in the Midlands around the edge of that, and you get 129. Why? There's only 7 refineries in this country. They're all coming from the same bloody tank. So why are we paying that sort of difference? And I repeat, yes, you get better petrol because they add detergents and things like that and catalysts to make, ultimate and premium and all those things. But it doesn't matter. You don't need really all that stuff. You just need good standard petrol. 97 grade would be preferable. I prefer 99 octane. But the thing is, we need to get people to actually contact their MP, contact their ministers, write with them. And I'll be putting a lot in the next week or two. There'll be lots more things for people to go to my site, and they can just press a button. Everything's ready for them, and it'll go to their MP, and you'll get a response from your MP. Because you can't, in fact, and just before the budget itself, the Treasury will get something like about 150,000 emails in a week from us straight to Rachel from Accounts' desk. It'll go. So we'll do all of that. But I'm afraid we've got a problem. Is that Ed Miliband is riding on this idealistic bandwagon. This because he's poisoning everyone by saying literally that fossil fuels are killing us. And we had that with Sadiq Khan when I stood for London Mayor. All that sort of thing. He said 4,000 people were dying in London because of poor air quality. It's a lie. One person is recorded, but and that person who died, unfortunately, it's a young kid, lived on the South Circular, got chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, got asthma, all those sorts of things. That it's a terrible thing to say about his mother, but that mother shouldn't have been living there. Should have been living in the country. But it happened, and I feel for people like that. But 4,000, and we at the moment this Labour government is just a complete litany of lies after lies after lies. And Sadiq Khan and Starmer are actually the masters of lying, and they're not very good in front of Donald Trump. But
wasn't that was wonderful to behold, wasn't it? Seeing the squirming worm squirm. I mean, it was just incredible. I mean, Trump just ate him for breakfast, didn't he? Absolutely destroyed.
It was a masterclass.
It was a complete masterclass. So keep us informed on that, Howard, and what we can do in practical terms to try and prevent this disaster of not being able to go and buy a nice shiny new diesel guzzling 4x4 in 20, and not that I could never afford one, but in 2030, we want people that can afford to go and buy big, horrible diesel guzzling cars that are so evil, according to Red Ed. We want people still to be able to do that. So let us know what we can do on that, Howard.
And Richard, let me be clear. I'm not anti-electric vehicles. I'm not.
Yeah.
What I am anti is being told that I must drive one.
Yeah.
That's the difference. And you think of the national grid, the situation. We just haven't got a national grid to charge. When you can get an electric vehicle that you can actually jump in, go down to the electric vehicle charging station, and it takes 3 minutes for you to be charged up, and you can go 400 miles on that charge, then people would definitely buy it. They won't buy it now. And the other thing it's very important to understand about electric vehicles is that they're very heavy. They're much heavier. They're something like 30% heavier than the internal combustion engines. And also, if they catch fire, and they do quite regularly, they're almost impossible to put out.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of car parks now, multi-story car parks, won't take electric vehicles because they're worried about collapsing. There's all sorts of things wrong with it. And if you live in a flat, 6-story, how are you going to charge your bloody vehicle?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's all a complete and utter mess. A lot of your list of viewers will know a lot of the things I'm saying, but the fact is the government is still hell-bent on net zero. Net zero is dominating our lives, and we're going to be paying the cost for that. And you heard me say about the 2030 ban was costing thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds per household, and again restricting our freedom of choice of what to drive. And
bankrupting us. This is the thing. It's going to bankrupt the nation. It's between that and the mass migration and all the stuff that's going on, it is going to completely ruin our country. And this is it's not academic. This is really happening. So it's not like it's we don't think that global warming. No, we're going to be bankrupt if we go down this road. As simple as that.
Well, we heard Donald Trump say he called them windmills. I love that, instead of wind turbines, windmills. I adored that. That was so beautifully put. And he knows what he's saying. It was incredible.
He does it deliberately.
And he said, cut taxes, cut immigration, etc. Those are the sorts of things we should be looking at, and cut crime, and those are the sorts of things we should be focusing, not on these little idealistic things that whatever we do, and this is the important thing in terms of trying to fight global warming, we won't make any difference to what's happening to the planet.
I agree. Totally. And again, it's ruining people's lives. It is self-harm of the highest. Well, it's not self-harm for them because they're all right, Jack. It's self-harm for the working class.
Well, that's right. There's a lot of people making millions out of this green. Dale Vince is the classic example of that person. He's actually recommended to the government, because he's a big Labour donor, that anyone that actually denies climate change should be put in prison.
Wow. I mean, this just shows you the nature of what we're dealing with, Howard.
Yep.
It is, and that's another thing. We'll talk about that maybe later on. But the attacks on freedom of speech that we're seeing are just absolutely off the chart. So, Howard, obviously, we've got an idea what's going on with Fair Fuel 2030. Tell us about reform and what happened when you joined. And at the end, we'll have some questions from the viewers and listeners. Tell us about reform. What happened there, and why has there been a change in your mind, or was it forced upon you?
Well, this again, go back a little bit. I was doing about 3 years ago. I was doing a show with Richard Tice, the leader of Reform at the time. He had every regular Sunday morning 3-hour show on Talk TV, and I used to appear once every 2 or 3 weeks talking about the motorists, the issues like we're talking now, what's going on, all policies, etc., about fuel duty, you name it. And I became a sort of a bit of a regular guest. So I got to know Richard about that. And one day Richard said to me, he said, Howard, let's have a beer afterwards. We went for a beer. And he said, Howard, how would you like to stand for London Mayor for Reform? And I said, no, I'm not into this. I'm apolitical. I have to be. You know, there are Labour drivers, there's Tory drivers, there's Green drivers, even, believe it or not. Caroline Lucas, I think, had a car and it was a diesel, but we won't go into that. She probably, I can't say for sure, but someone told me that was the anecdote. But anyway, I said to Richard, no, not. But there was a certain elephant in the room, a big elephant in the room called ULEZ expansion, the ULEZ around London. And that was Sadiq Khan's, lie, trying to expand ULEZ even more than it needed to be. And he said, how would you like to take it? I said, yeah, well, that fits in with my raison d'etre, the motorist, looking after that policy. So really, and I stood mainly on trying to reduce that policy, that coming in. And I said yes. And I got a phone call from Nigel Farage after it said, that's the best idea I never had, having you become London Mayor. Yeah. And I said, it's a privilege. And at that point, I have to say to you that I was really, I like Nigel. And I mean, he's a consummate professional, brilliant. And I'm a Brexiteer, and all those sorts of things. But Richard was still the leader of the party. And to be honest, he was a bit of a softie in that respect. And there's a lot of adjectives put his way, and I won't support all of them, but I think he was soft. And
you're talking about Richard?
Yeah.
I got that impression. Yeah.
And anyway, I did stand, but the writing was on the wall quite early. I got very little support. There was no money in the kitty at that point because Nigel wasn't leader. So I stood, and even on the day of the election in London, where I was hoping that there'll be a few people from Reform headquarters coming along to take a picture of me, putting my vote into the ballot box in Westminster. I mean, that normally happens. I was the London candidate, and usually, everyone else, coming in would have a nice load of photographs. Not one Reform headquarter person turned up. But hang on a second. This is the good news. One person did turn up and called me, and that was Rupert Lowe. And I think it's the most incredible thing. That man, you've seen what's happened to him since. But anyway, I got 3.6% of the vote, and that doesn't sound much, and it isn't. But when you come to the situation, that was about 80,000 votes across London. But when it comes down to, and bear in mind, London is full of the liberal elite that don't drive, so it's not important to them. But he only got, Sadiq Khan only got 18%. So that means 82% didn't want him.
Yeah.
And so that's the sort of thing we're up against. And he got the Muslim vote, big time. I mean, I went around when I was canvassing. I went to various places, and corner shop owners, Muslim owners, lovely people, came up to me and said, "Oh, I've got my polling card." I said, "Well, you've got two there." They said, "Yeah, that's my surname first, and this is my middle name first." And they used it. See, it's correct.
Do you know, I'm going to tell you something, Howard, right? And I'm not sure if I spoke about this publicly before. When we made the Rape of Britain films, right, in Telford, we had access to a huge amount of data. I'm not going to go into where it came from, what have you, but we had access to a huge amount of data. And it was basically the names of the people that lived in the various different houses, right? And you would have Iqbal Siddiqui, Iqbal Hussein Siddiqui, Hussein. you would have like 6 or
Oh,
7. It was all the
yeah.
same person. You had about 80 people living in every house, right? Okay, I'm exaggerating a bit, but there was, so, and all of those are postal voters, right?
Richard, it's not exaggeration. That is exactly what happened.
It's incredible. Massive electoral fraud happening everywhere.
I think. I know, and obviously Labour won't do anything about it because they've got such a big majority.
They'll be turkeys voting Christmas, won't they?
Well, they wanted, they were big on proportional representation, but they won't want it now, would they? First past the post suits. And that's the point. But anyway, I did that. But Reform did ask me, said, well done, Howard, you did well in that sort of thing. Great stuff. How would you like to stand for a PPC somewhere? And they offered 3 places. And I was advised to take the one which is basically the front line of immigration. That was Dover. So I did Dover. I went campaign down. And at that point, Nigel was the leader.
Yeah.
He came in, he got rid of Ben Habib, he got rid of loads of good people who I thought, what's going on here? I don't like this whatsoever. But anyway, I stood down there. I still believe in a lot of reform policies still, but I'm afraid the way the party operates, I just can't handle. So down in Dover, I campaigned for 3.5 weeks, and I came second. I knocked the Tory into third. I got 24%. And Mike Tapp, who won it, he got 33%, I think, and he was campaigning for 2.5 years.
Is that the ex-Power guy, Mike Tapp? Is he ex-Power?
Yeah. There's a bit of a question about whether he was that as well, but anyway, it's another. I've got a bit of dirt on him, but it's no point now. But the point I'm showing, if I'd another month, maybe 6 weeks, I think I could have nicked it. And because that was that was the home of the MP Natalie Elphick, who crossed the floor, if you remember, went from Tory to Labour.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
And she's also was married to Charlie Elphick, and he had a bit of he went to prison for certain things. We won't go into detail there. But anyway, so I thought, okay, I've done quite well. And then at the same time that Nigel virtually came in after the election, a certain person came to chair. They're called Zia Youssef. And I'm afraid, anyway, I thought, great. I saw his first maiden speech, and I thought, oh, this is good. He's very good. He was very great. I thought, I can't believe it. And he's a Muslim. He's talking very westernized British citizenship approach to life. And I thought, okay, let's give him a go. Anyway, I wrote to him, and I had his telephone number, WhatsApped him, tried to call him, and he didn't take any of my calls, respond any of my emails whatsoever. And then I knew that I was just I was being used, and I always was used. And round about the end of last year, well, in fact, it was about autumn, I went on to the Dan Wootton show, and we're talking about lots of things but up came the question of, and you know what came up? What do I think of Tommy Robinson? And that was it. Everything was saying about Tommy and all that sort of thing. I said, I don't know him from Adam. And I've said this to you before with Richard and on Paul Thorpe, and both of you. I've said I didn't know him from Adam and everything, but I did have massive respect, as Rupert has said, as Ben has said, for his, the child rape gang issue and how he put it to the top of the headline agenda, even though it wasn't on the mainstream media. But he put it out there, and I wouldn't have done anything about it if it wasn't for Tommy.
Yeah.
And I decided, to say, that's what I said. And I also visited him in prison. I spent an hour with him when he was in prison, and what an inspiration that man is. That sort of thing. He's an acquired taste, as I am, as you are. All these sort of things in life. But the thing that really happened badly was earlier this year. I got a text from Richard Tice, and he simply said this: if you continue to support or even talk positively about Tommy Robinson, we're going to expel you from the party. And I said, what? And anyway, I managed to have a chat with Ben Habib, and Ben said, Howard, get out now, resign now. Don't let them, because they're going to push you out. And that's when I got really to know Ben Habib quite well, because he could see that I was being treated like shit after. It's not easy going around campaigning around London or going around Dover. I'm 70 years of age, and I was 69 then. And I, it's a tiring event. And I didn't have any money, the sort of thing, all that sort of thing.
I mean, this is the laugh. People think that that kind of we're raking money and doing this. Doing political activism completely ruins any chances of you ever been rich ever. And I think that's what happened to Nigel. Nigel. That's why he got so involved with GB News, because he could have probably been a multimillionaire if he'd have been in business in his own right. And doing this is not a career option if you want to make money. That's for sure, Howard.
You're absolutely right, and the point is, a lot of people say, "Well, my biggest weakness about Fairfield UK is I didn't monetize it enough. I haven't done that. Partly because it's quite interesting. I get phone calls and I go Fairfield UK, and the person said, "I said, is that the accounts department?" I said, "Oh, I'll pass you over." I put the phone on. Hello, accounts. and that's the way it works. I mean,
multiple hats, yeah.
Yeah, well, the fact is, there's 1.7 million supporters have signed up. A quarter of a million are pretty active now, so it drops massively. And about 100,000 are very, very active. And they're the ones that really give their MP a hard time, and all the ministers a hard time. So, but the important thing is, and going back to what you said earlier, the most important is getting your grassroots on side, and that's where I fell out with Reform, because they basically stabbed every single good person I met in grassroots. A lot of them now with Advance UK, which I'm delighted they're there. But some of the things, there's some great people. But Nigel is a consummate professional, brilliant communicator. He's also good at mass hypnosis. He's very clever, and he hits all the buttons beautifully. But when it comes to the crunch, like, oh, mass deportation is impossible. No, it's not, Nigel. And that's where Rupert stood up. And Rupert was treated badly. He was accused by Razia, abuse, all that sort of thing. He's accused. He had dementia and all those sorts of things. And he's very popular.
I mean, here's a question. It's from Best Black. Howard, Jenny and I would like to know what your views are of Restore Britain, and thank you for all you do. So let's actually ask that one now. Howard, what's your thoughts on what Rupert's doing with Restore, and how that kind of fits in with what we're trying to do?
Well, Ben Habib and Rupert Lowe, there's nothing that separates them whatsoever. They agree on all of it. It's not a problem. Getting to the end game, I think you'll find at the end game there will be one party. Ben believes on the fact that the ballot box is important, and we need to set a good party up as early as possible, because the ballot box is where you actually make a decision on who you want. Rupert, let's think about it. Put yourself in his position. He is an MP already.
Yep.
He's now an independent MP, as is James McMurdoch, by the way. The other one who he had a bit of a problem as well. But anyway, Rupert is an independent MP in Great Yarmouth, a brilliant businessman. Was chairman of Southampton and football club. He's been around the block a bit. He's another great communicator as well. But he hits the nail on the head. Now, if he said, "I'm joining Advance UK," I think his constituents might say, "Hang on, who's that? What's going on here?" So maybe further down the line, when it's right to do it. So he's set up a thing called Restore Britain, and it's part of the Great British Pack and all the other bits and pieces that are going on, which was basically a think tank or movement, which actually puts together proper right-wing conservative policies. I mean, conservative in the true sense of conservative, not the one now. It's not recognisable, is it? But from a point of view that is what he's doing. So Restore Britain is a brilliant movement. I joined it, as did Ben, but I joined the party as well. And the party will be slowly moving up and I think we've got 16,000 members now,
which is phenomenal. I mean,
yeah.
Do you know what? I mean, this is the thing. I think what people have got to realise is that, what is it, 3 weeks, 4 weeks in now? Are we 4 weeks in? 4 weeks in. I was in UKIP in 2018 when we had a massive sort of boost from getting the football guys and the veterans and Tommy's lot and loads of just patriots. Everyone was joining UKIP, everyone was supporting UKIP, and we went up by about 3,000. And believe you me, every social media platform, Howard, it was UKIP. We were pushing every hour. We're doing demos with UKIP, but it was a massive effort. And we literally went up, I think, by about 3,000. And Gerard was tearing his hair out. Gerard Band's going, "What's going on here? This should be more than that." So the fact that we have got to 16,000 in a month, and like, to me, that is a massive. I mean, Ben's talking about the 30,000. Like, if you haven't joined, I'm going to say this now before we go on to Advance. If you haven't joined Advance, go and have a look on the website. Hear what Howard's got to say. You've been listening to what I've got to say about it. For me, Advance is the option. There's a lot of UKIPers in here. I was in UKIP until the day that Ben launched Advance, and I literally made a snap decision and went, "Okay, I'm going to jump." And a lot of people saying, "Oh, you disloyal." It's not a question of being disloyal to UKIP. I'm loyal to my country. No disrespect to UKIP. they're not going to win the next general election, right? I would love to see everybody from UKIP come across to advance, including Nick, and I'm sure Nick would have a place in the mix of things, because again, he's doing a great job. He's passionate. But that's my advice to UKIP: shut up shop and come join us. And it's the same with all the rest of the parties. SDP, all the rest of them, just the decent parties that are out there. And there are some decent parties, and I count UKIP as a decent party with thoroughly decent people in it. But you're not going to get what you've got with Ben and Howard, and again, if the Restore thing comes together with Advance, I know it sounds crazy, Howard. I genuinely believe if all the planets align, there could be the biggest shock in British electoral history. That's.
Well, I admire your optimism, and I'm nearly with you on that. I mean, I've got to see a bit more. We've got a long way to go yet, but what I do see, and this is very, very, very important, is that there is no other party that is as transparent, no other party that is that democratic. Hang on a second, Nigel. I threw something at Nigel Farage when I left. I'll tell you what, I'd come back, I said, if you actually ask your members, you threw out a referendum on who should be party leader and who should be running a reform. Because we know there's the Reform UK Limited, there's Reform 2025 Limited, there's all these sorts of things. You just read the articles of memorandum of Advance UK. It is totally and utterly based on the grassroots, us. People like us will dictate the future of the party. And for him to say, and you can never imagine Nigel say, I think I'll get 100 people to actually put together and to hold me to account, within the party. Yeah. But Ben has done that. Ben doesn't need to do this. He's well off. He's comfortable, but he's got the brain the size of a planet. And I watch him in action. He's never, ever wrong-footed. And I've watched him closely, and I believe in him. There's no two sides to that man. There's only one side, and he wants his country back.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and I think the thing about Ben is, Howard, like you're saying, he never puts a foot wrong, but he is a brilliant communicator as well. He's not bombastic. He's not as flamboyant as Nigel. He's very quiet. He's very calm. But, I could, and again, I know people think I'm getting carried away and all the rest of it, but I could see Ben walking at 10 Downing Street. I could see Ben meeting with, if it's JD Vance, it's going to be next American president, hopefully. I could see him working together with JD Vance, but you could also see him going to India, Pakistan, and visiting those countries, because he's got family connections with those countries as well. And again, if we're going to try and do mass deportation of people that shouldn't be here, we're going to have good relationships with those countries as well. This is what people don't realize. You can't go in as a bully boy and try and say, well, we're just going to deport everybody and that's it, without thinking through how it's going to be done and how that path has got to be negotiated. And I think Ben's got a lot more to give than probably anybody else out there in terms of, and the thing about it, what shines through about Ben to me, Howard, his integrity.
Exactly.
His integrity.
Exactly. Well, the other thing also is you mentioned about him being accepted. He would be very statesmanlike. You're dead right, around the world. But one of the things incredibly, which I would say, is that Ben is the type of person that will go down and see those mums in Epping, and where this is going on, rather than being accused, of being right-wing thugs. And let's face it, I've been accused of that. One of the things that Richard Tice said when asked about Tommy Robinson in an interview, he turned around and simply said, "Oh, I don't want any of that lot. I'm not one of that lot." And I actually emailed him after and said, "I'm one of that lot, mate, and I'm proud to be one of that lot." And
yeah.
You look at Finch, you look at Lucy Connolly, and I don't understand why the Prime Minister hasn't been put in prison for inciting violence and calling us right-wing thugs.
Well, let's hope. I mean, if we manage to get power, let's hope that we have a justice minister that will, maybe we could have Tommy Robinson as justice minister and prisons minister. I mean,
wouldn't that be great?
Oh, I'm telling you, listen, stranger things have happened. Look at Nelson Mandela. You know what I mean? So,
exactly. There's a terrorist, a world leader.
Exactly. I mean, Tommy's not. The thing is, the crazy thing about this is, I said this before, says, people make the connection between Tommy Robinson and Nelson Mandela. I say Nelson Mandela is nothing like Tommy Robinson, because Tommy Robinson is not a terrorist. Exactly. Let's just be brutally honest about that. And and again, with Tommy, he is, you know, he's unpredictable. He does crazy things sometimes. But listen, if you're in with Tommy, you're in with Tommy with everything, warts and all, like Oliver Cromwell, warts and all. People like Tommy are needed for this hour. We need brave, fearless people. And I think all of us are a bit crazy, so that's why we all probably get on so well as well.
You're absolutely right. But as usual, the recent incident in St Pancras, the mainstream media, as usual, they've used words. He fled to Spain. He was already going to Spain.
Ridiculous.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I, it was very important for me, and I must thank Paul Thorpe for arranging it. Arranging for me to go and visit him in prison.
Yep.
And I sat, you know, went through 16 doors to get to him, and we sat down while there was two warders sitting in the same room with us. We sat down, and Tommy, I always remember this. He used some of his sort of daily food allowance to get me some crisps, some chocolate.
Yeah.
And I sat with him, and I didn't know what to expect. I mean, I'm 6'4", and he's, you know, I think he's 5'6" or something, but he's very fit, 5'6". But as the guy in St Pancras found out,
right. You wouldn't. He might be 5'6", but you wouldn't want to right hook off him. That's for sure.
Exactly. But I sat with him, and I listened to him for 2 hours, of which he probably spoke for 1 hour and 55 minutes, and I was inspired. He was. If anyone could say like a brotherly love, he was adorable in the way he came across, and I think it's wrong just because he's, you know, he speaks quite Luton-esque. That's where he's from. I mean, I'm from Southeast London. I was born in Lewisham, you know, and depending on I'm a bit of a chameleon. If I have to present in APPG meetings, I do get to concentrate on how I speak a bit. But he is what you get. He's honest as the day is long, and he's the reason why these people, we you know, and why Rupert is doing so well with his national inquiry. I mean, it's a shame, isn't it? That's another thing that Reform promised. Reform promised they would do a national inquiry and then didn't do it. And they promised lots of things and they didn't do it. And this sort of thing. And I'm fed up the back teeth with, you know, Reform were everything I wanted, and they've disappointed big time millions of people.
Well, do you know what, Howard? I think Advance is going to be everything that Reform was meant to be.
That's a good way of putting it, Richard. That's a good way.
Advance is going to be everything that Reform was meant to be, and that's something to really, you know, to really go for. And the thing on Tommy, I mean, again, I'm not going to dwell on this, but I mean, I think the reality is that I've known Tommy a lot of years. When I went to see him in prison, I mean, it's pretty horrific going through. I was thinking, imagine being in here. I got PTSD just walking through the gates, Howard. You know what I mean? You know, I was thinking, you know, if I say one thing wrong on a live stream, I'm joining him. You know what I mean? So, but no, all joking aside, I mean, when I went to see him, we had such a laugh. I mean, I'm not kidding. We just laughed. And, you know, there was my friend, a Jewish friend of mine, Tommy knows well, we both went to see Tommy together, and we just laughed for however long it was, 2 hours. There was, you know, it was just, and it was great. I mean, but when you know, whenever he went back to his cell, right? Yeah. And this is why I think, and I do want to say this, I think people have got to understand how damaged Tommy will be because of what he has just gone through. And, you know, there's a guy, called Steve Gallant. Steve Gallant was the guy that tackled the jihadi on London Bridge, Howard.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, he's a friend of mine. He sent me his book, and I was talking to him the other week, and I said, Steve, I've got to be honest, I haven't read your book yet, you know. And he was, and I thought I felt really bad after it, so I went away and read his book, and he went through exactly what the prison system is like and how it is completely run by these jihadist gangs, right? And for Tommy to be under that threat in there, and then to be in solitary the whole time, I don't think anyone can underestimate the effect that's had on him. When I give him a hug when he was going back to his cell, and I just saw something in his eyes, and it was almost, when you drop your kids off at school, first day at school, you drop your kid off, and they have that look in their eyes. Do you know what I mean? And they just look back at you, and it was that sort of look, and it wasn't, and that's not because he's weak. That's because he was going back to 21 hours in lockup with nobody to talk to except a prison officer. And I think the prison officers, he spoke very highly of the prison officers. But, you know, so I think we've got to understand what Tommy has been through, and that he is probably suffering from complex PTSD, all sorts of stuff. And, you know, and again, if somebody's in your face and
exactly.
and going at you,
only how much it can take. There's only
Yeah.
so much you can take.
There's only such thing, and let's just leave it at that because we don't know what's happening until anything else comes out. I haven't commented on it on the incident because I don't know what happened in that incident at all, and I genuinely don't. I haven't asked him.
I agree with you,
let,
Richard.
let's wait and see what
move on.
happens. Yeah, let's move on. Okay, so we've left Reform. You're chatting to Ben, you're chatting to Rupert. Then Advance UK happens. What made you make the decision to jump in with Advance, Howard?
Well, I suppose it's history on the basis the fact I put so much effort into wanting to get our country back. And, you know, I'm not a big name like Rupert or like Ben, etc. But I've done enough. I've contributed something to this country in terms of helping people, especially small businesses. You know, as I said, Mrs. Bloggs who are going to a medical appointment, all those sorts of people. And I'm quite proud of what I've done. But the job's not finished yet, because I want a government that's going to be looking after us. And I see it. My daughter, for example, is 34 years of age. She can't get on the housing ladder unless a bank of mum and dad really helps, and this sort of thing. And it's those sorts of things. And when I see on here Starmer saying things, there's plenty of housing for immigrants, you know, and we're building 45,000 houses. It's absolute bullshit. And we go through this whole process of lie after lie after lie. Their manifesto was honestly a work of Enid Blyton, total fairy tale, etc. And the big thing for me, and it really is the big thing for me, is net zero. If we get rid of net zero, if we stop the net zero, we'll all be better off. If we continue with net zero, we're all going to suffer big time financially, and that's middle class, middle England down to low income families, etc. Because all of the things that affect the motorists are regressive, and they hit the poorest the hardest. And yet the people who, you know, live in London, the elite, have probably got their Porsches and their Lamborghinis parked somewhere or whatever. But those people have got the most perfect public transport system. 87% of people actually have to drive, and they've got no choice.
Yeah,
they've got no choice. And these are the sorts of things. So and net zero is going to impact on what they drive, how they drive, cost of driving. You've seen things like cycle lanes, LTNs, low traffic neighbourhoods, parking costs going up, ULEZs, congestion fees. I could go on. VED's gone up. People, you know, that hasn't got much of a headline. Even electric vehicles are taxed now. It's not only 150, 125 quid, but it's still being taxed. So where's the logic in the environment? They don't produce any emissions, but they're still being taxed. But quite right, they should be, because they're heavy. They're making potholes. You know, those are the sorts of things. And so you asked, why am I doing this? The job's not finished yet. And obviously, I sat down with my darling wife, Jenny, and she simply said, you know, you can't leave this. And you rate Ben. And I have to say, Ben Habib was my trigger to say yes.
Me too.
Don't tell him this. I hope he's not listening.
No, we'll not tell him. We'll keep it just between me, you, and the 500 people that are watching.
So cut a long story short, that's the reason, and the job's not done. I don't think I'll be standing in 2029, but maybe I will, because, you know, Donald Trump's 78, so I'd only be 74.
A spring chicken, you know. Yeah, well, I think there's a lot about, you know, I think the world we're living in now, we need experienced people, and that's no disrespect to you. We need young people as well. We need a mix. We need a mix of the elders who have lived a life and know the pitfalls, and the young bucks that are just going at people like Charlie Downs and what have you, that are just gung ho, and and Nick even, and all the you know, the young lads that have got a lot. Well, I don't know. Do you know what? I think we're not doing too bad on the energy stakes, Howard. I think we put a pretty good shift in, mate. Do you know what I mean? You know?
Well, he says you're absolutely right. I mean, I rate Nick Tenconi. I mean, I do. I think he's a good lad like that. There are certain people,
as well.
Yeah, and there's a lot of other people. I mean, but, you know, from my point of view, we do need to bring the right together somehow, and I'd love to see that happen. And I think we got to get around the best person, forgetting about the party for the moment, the best person to do the job.
Exactly.
As you said, the statesmanship, the credibility, the ability, and the energy to do that sort of thing. It's all very well having a megaphone and shouting, you know, the government's crap and all the other things. That's not going to get anywhere.
It's not.
What Mrs. Bloggs wants to know is her pension safe, and you know, can she afford to go and see her children? You know, and can she go out? Is she safe to walk down the streets? You know, these are the sorts of things that I think Ben will address brilliantly with the right people around him.
Well, I was going to say that. I mean, I think, you know, again, and I'm not privy to all that's going on. I'm only getting tidbits here and there. But from what I can gather, there's some very, very good people. Tell us a bit about the Electoral College Howard, and obviously, are we okay to say who's on the electoral college yet, or who's been not? Are we not going to talk about that? Or just tell me how what the
I don't think it's not been totally finalised, but the
yeah
idea, what Ben said, is that there is the executive, which
yeah
obviously is in charge of the bits
yeah
and pieces. And he asked me, would I like to be on it? I said, I'm happy to do. He said, well, look, you go on the college. Now, the college is this. It's a bunch of people. He wants to get 100. I think
yeah
100 is maybe a bit too many.
yeah I
But
think so.
100, yeah, 100, 50 to 100 people, all with a particular skill set. They could be expert in health, transport, tax, care, you name it. And we could bounce all those people. And what their job is to help create policy, okay, because and help actually hold Ben and the leadership to account. And if they don't like it, you can get rid of Ben.
Yeah.
That's the power of the college. And it's Ben's idea. There's no other party that does this.
Yeah. And Ben, the thing about Ben is he'd be quite happy if you got rid of it. Like you said when I interviewed him, I said, Ben, I said, look, I says, is there anything you'd rather be doing than this? He says, yeah, I'd be rather be playing golf and sitting on a beach, drinking a G&T, watching the sun go down. I was like, yeah, I think we all concur, we all agree with that, but Ben, you can't go until the job's done, so we've got to talk a bit.
And that's my point. The job's not done. We're in a situation where the only reason why a reform are doing well is because Labour and the Tories are so bad. And I mean, more than bad. They are absolutely disgustingly bad. And he can just sit there and do nothing, Nigel. This is what saddens me, because he is not being held to account anywhere at the moment.
I agree. It says a lot, doesn't it? It says a lot that the media aren't holding him to account. It says a lot. I mean, I'm not going to go into Nigel, but again, because we're not going to dish reform. What we're going to do is as Advance UK, members and supporters, we're going to obviously talk up Advance UK, because I do think it has to be the solution. And again, if you think about this, Howard, we're talking about Restore, we're talking about UKIP, talking about SDP. Can you imagine if there was just a sort of like a magnetic pulling together of all those strands in time for the next general election? That's why I say if all the planets align, and I do put that as a caveat, if all the ducks are in a row, there could be a massive upset in 2029. But we cannot afford to put a foot wrong. And that's one of the reasons I'm probably not going to go on the electoral college, because I do that thing there between my ears. Sometimes I'm not talking about my nose and my eyes. That gob of mine can get me into bother from time to time. So I'm just.
I think you'd be warmly welcomed.
We'll see.
You've got a presence. You've got a lot of respect, mate, and you're very principled. And you don't. I think you're very principled by saying, right, I can see UKIP's not right. You can see the direction we travel, and I think I'd love to sit down with Nick Tenconi and the guy, the head of Heritage, and all of those sorts of SDP. Sit around and say, let's have a glass of wine together and say, honestly, why are we not amalgamating or merging, or even if you're separate parties, but endorsing.
Exactly, and working out some sort of electoral pact where you go, okay, where's your strongest? Where's the place that Nick Tenconi can get elected? Where's the place that William Coulston can get elected? I mean, William Coulston, brilliant guy. And I know there's a friend of mine, I'm not going to say his name, but there's a very good friend of mine, ex-military lad, a veteran, fought in Afghanistan, super guy. And he said this to me, exactly what you say. He says, why don't we all get together, UKIP, SDP, Advance, whatever other parties are worth bothering with, get the main people into a room, and not even necessarily the main people, maybe it's just the underlings like me. Get us all into a room and go, okay, let's have a glass of wine, a few beers, a nice meal, and talk about how we can actually put all this together, because we all want to save the country. We all have the same goal. So it's how do we, and this is the key, how do we achieve that? Because the worst thing that would happen is if we start bitching and fighting with each other. We've got to try and pull this thing together. And I'd love to see a lot of reform guys come across, because I've got loads of mates in reform. Loads of my mates are in reform. And again, I'm going, guys, you need your road to Damascus experience. You need to realize what's really going on here. You need to take the red pill. But, so I think that's
you're spot on, Richard, with what you're saying and what you exhibit. I mean, you're discussing a dose of common sense. That's your problem. And what we're seeing, honestly, I've got a lot of reform contacts who regularly. I don't know how many WhatsApp groups I'm on. I'm still on some residual ones than when I was campaigning last year. And they keep saying, "Will you come back? Will you come back?" And I said the only way I'd come back is to reformed, actually transforms into Advanced UK. And in other words, because I think that going back to the college thing, I think it's an important point to emphasise. The college will put together policy and present it as well. And there'll be a lot of intelligent people presenting that. And that's the gradual build up to 2029. Policies produced by 100 people or agreed by. There may not be, certainly the majority of the 100 would have to approve it. Yeah. And that's the sort of thing. And these will be concrete policy documents based on fact, and they're not hearsay. Now, the problem we do have is the mainstream media. Thank heavens for people like yourself, the independents. We're talking about Maya Tusi, we're talking about Dan Wootton, we're talking about Paul Thorpe, yourself, and umpteen others I know quite well. I've been on shows with, etc. It's funny, really, this is a compliment to you, type people like yourself, is that when I'm actually on you, the number of people that sign up to Fairfield UK rockets. It just nice people. But when I'm on something like the BBC, there's nothing.
Nobody watches the BBC, Howard.
No, well, I've turned down the BBC, LBC recently. Obviously, we won't go. James O'Brien is one of my favourites. I don't think. But you got, there's lots of these mainstream media outlets and papers that do nothing. And I see people now. The newspaper industries is going down the tubes. And from my point of view, it's the independent media that's going to be actually get Advanced UK into power. And so it's people like you that keep shouting from the rooftops.
I think so. I mean, we could go off on another tangent because obviously we've got this monstrous internet harms legislation, which is been used already. I mean, I've noticed. I mean, normally if I'm doing, it could be because it's summer, a lot of people are on holiday. Normally doing a live stream, if it was you coming on, Howard, I'd probably have about 1,000. If we're doing it Paul Thorpe, he'd probably have about 4,000 watching live. We're at about 500, and it's not because there's anything wrong with what we're doing. I'm wondering, are we already being shadow banned by the deep state doing some sort of cozy thing with Google, for YouTube? And it's happened. And again, it's like the chemtrails thing. I'm saying that because it has happened before. It's not imaginary. They have actually done that. So we need to again work out, can we get in touch with contacts in the States that would say, okay, well, this isn't on, get some of your, because there was a very high powered delegation over here looking at this very thing yesterday. And, we need to be talking to those sort of people. And again, that's all about getting those connections and having things coordinated. So there's probably someone in Restore in advance who would have those connections. And then from our point of view as YouTubers and social media people, there we go. So there's Kelly saying notifications are not going out properly. So a lot of people have been saying whenever, I do a live stream, notifications go out everywhere, but people aren't getting notifications. So they're not seeing it, and obviously then they're not, they're not coming on. But that's another question. Want to quickly touch on the migrant crisis, if you've got time, Howard? We're on an hour there. Can you do another 10 minutes with me?
Of course I can.
Right. Okay. Let's talk about the migrant crisis. Waterlooville last night. Sorry to everybody in Waterlooville, right? I didn't have a clue where it was. Okay. And they probably don't have a clue where Bangor County Down is in Northern Ireland. So, but we are brothers in arms because we've stood outside a migrant hotel for 2.5 years every Friday night doing a peaceful protest. There's never been a pick of trouble at it the whole time that we've been doing it. There'll probably be a riot tomorrow night after me saying that, but it's been totally peaceful. Waterlooville last night. Did you see it, Howard? I mean, what do you think about those guys in Waterlooville?
I discussed this with Dan Wootton today. On if you don't mind me, he's not a competitor.
He's great. I love that. Dan's brilliant. Me and my wife sit down 5 o'clock every day when we have our tea. We sit down and watch Dan Wootton.
You saw my ugly mug twice.
But he still never invited me on his show. So come on, Dan.
Yeah, I think the whole thing, what's happening, it's happening right across the country. And the big thing about this is that people are fed up to the back teeth. These are decent, honest, hard-working families, your mums and dads, all that sort of. There's no a right-wing thug amongst any of them.
Nope.
And this, what we're seeing now is this whole thing. It wasn't hotels this time. The council down there are giving £250,000 flats for these people. I mean, hang on a second. What's going on? How is the council not fighting that against the government? The government are riding them, they're riding roughshod right across them, saying you will do this. How come? I mean, if I was a councillor down there, I would be absolutely steaming into number 10 and say, no, we're not having this. And so and it's happened. Obviously, I've been invited to go up to Epping not Epping, where is it? The Canary Wharf one, on Saturday, and I might do that. Unfortunately, I've got some other things are going on at well, but I would normally go because I do tend these things. And I went to something like 56 ULEZ rallies in my campaigning right around London, and that was an interesting experience. Again, the mainstream media didn't cover it until we got to a situation where 4 or 5 of them were too close to where Sadiq Khan lived.
Yes.
You remember the Tooting 4 and 5?
That's right. That's right.
We'd already campaigned there 3 or 4 times before, but because we were getting a lot of traction, he decided to actually go and say they were abusing him and harassing his family. We were nowhere near it.
I mean,
anyway,
that was such a liberty. I mean, that was such an attack on free speech because there was no violence, there was no threat. Look, everyone's got a right to express their opinion, even if it's in Anglo-Saxon language about Sadiq Khan. I mean, that's called freedom of speech, for goodness sake.
Well, they were 3/4 of a mile away from his house front, and he used that anyway. They were found guilty, but then on appeal, it was thrown out. Which is great news, which is great. But there's some good people there, and they're still campaigning. I mean, I'm quite close. Close is the wrong word. I know quite a few of the Blade runners, who actually chopped some of these cameras down. I don't advocate people breaking the law and criminality like that, but I can understand the frustration, and that's what's happened at Waterloo last night and continuing, and these other places. People are sick to death of what's going on. Absolutely fed up with back teeth, and it's going to get worse.
Absolutely.
And what gets me is how Starmer, continues to think that it's the right wing there are protesters, there are thugs in there. All I see, the people that are stirring up are the Antifa, the left wing, the anti-racist people.
Exactly. I mean, the thing is, it's not in our interests. And I keep saying this. I mean, the reality is if we had demonstrations all over the UK and they were all peaceful, and it's so important, they've got to be peaceful and within the law, but every single one of those demonstrations has to be properly policed, which costs the government money and makes them think about what's going on. But I think what you said at the very beginning of this, and it kind of brings us full circle, in terms of activism, what you've done has actually worked, Howard. And that's where, and again, we'll not do it on this show tonight, but we need to talk to you about how do we get what we're trying to do with the illegal migrants, the hotels, the community cohesion stuff. How do we have a voice like you managed to get for the fair fuel? How can we get a voice before the election? Because obviously the best way to get a voice is get in Parliament and actually do it yourselves. But how can we get a voice with these numpties that are running the country that will actually make a difference in the next 3 or 4 years? And I think that's something that we probably need to talk about in another conversation.
I'm happy to do that. The crux of what I do was simply this: is to get as many people on the ground, and bear in mind these people are getting more frustrated as more and more people saying it, is to actually make their MP insecure. That their job's not you get these 20,000, 15,000 majorities. They can be overturned now. That's nothing.
Exactly.
And all we got to do is say to them, look, follow this, please. We want you to follow this. Do you agree that we need to cut the votes or cut immigration? We need to have strong borders. We need to cut crime. We need to cut tax. Do you agree with that? If you don't, bye-bye. We're not going with this.
Well, that's the idea behind the pledge. I mean, the pledge, again, we kind of, these things store. We're kind of around 60,000 when you take all the duplication out. So we've got about 60,000 people signed up. Now that's not going to win a general election. But what it can do in a marginal seat, if there's 1,000 people in a marginal that have signed the pledge, and you go to the MP and say, do you agree with all these things? And he says no, you can cost him his seat. And I think that's why things like fair fuel, the pledge, they're really, really important, so that we know where people are and what they believe, so that we can go to them and say, well, your MP doesn't believe any of that. So, vote accordingly.
One of the, I don't like really giving me congratulations, but the Lib Dems actually are brilliant at targeting, and that's what they do. They throw everything into a small number of areas. So if you, and obviously every party does this. They look at seats and how they, who won last time, what in terms of actually the marginality or whatever you want to call it of the winning, etc. Who came second? What would happen if we work with them? All that sorts of things. A lot more science, but we haven't the resources, Richard. I was lucky to have, and I even though the Tories are the big disappointments for me, massive disappointment, there were some fantastic people that helped me, and I was right up to the top. You know, I had, you know, and I was called into Treasury meetings and things like that. So it's quite good that I got to that stage, because I didn't I didn't get my megaphone out. I didn't cause direct act. I didn't, you know, I could easily now get 10,000 cars and block the whole of the centre of London off.
Yeah, yeah.
But I
You could
don't
do it.
do
With,
that.
you could do it with one email, Howard. You could do it with
Yeah,
one email. But
yeah.
again, I think if what you've done is more effective, that's why I want to learn from you about how we can do that, because I've done direct action for years, and the direct bit's great, but the action isn't really achieving what we wanted to achieve, because all the things we're fighting against have gone up instead of going down while we've been doing
Well,
this. You know.
one of the problems of direct action is you usually get the opposition come in and stir
Yeah,
it up, and that's what's reported.
yeah,
You know, and that's where the mainstream media. There's several good people in the Sun I work closely with, a few people in the Mail, but they love me to bits. They're what
yeah,
I've done.
yeah,
The Sun still take credit for it. You know, the Sun what won it. You know, I get that, but but they are. I've got a lot of respect from certain, you know, right up to the top. And
yeah,
there, I did this week Plank of the Week at Talk TV, which is
yeah.
in Rupert Murdoch Towers at London Bridge. You know, and I know a lot of the people there. The important thing is to get your face known, and Ben's doing a cracking job. I don't know how Ben's got the energy. He's everywhere,
Oh,
isn't he?
it's incredible. I mean, again, just dynamic. And Ben's, I think Ben's coming 60, you know, so, you know,
Yeah.
just to the young people, but, you know, we can still do it when we're in our 50s and 60s and even early 70s. Do you know what I mean? We're just going to keep going. I just say I'm going to keep going until they nail that final nail in the coffin. I'll be saying just one more thing, you know. But this is an interesting one. Jack Bradley, no Tory MPs in advance UK, because that would end badly. I want to address that, and I want to hear what Howard has to say. There are some good Tory MPs that are actually fighting the fight more than the Reform MPs are at the minute, to be brutally honest with you. Nick Timothy, for one, is taking
Yeah,
a real stand against the
brilliant,
Islamophobia. And
brilliant man.
let's get it right, Howard. Let's just be brutally, am I going to say, yeah, I'm going to say it. He's putting his life on the line. Nick is
He
literally putting his life on the
stood
line.
up in Parliament and condemned Islam.
Islam,
He
not
actually,
Muslims, not Muslims. He
yeah,
said, I don't believe that
yeah,
Muhammad
that's
was a
right.
prophet.
Sorry,
Yeah,
yeah,
you know. So from a theological point of view, he said he's a Christian and he didn't believe Muhammad was a prophet sent from God. Now that's a very, very brave thing for an MP to do, especially in like what happened to it was David Amos, wasn't it? Was it David
yeah.
Amos?
David
Yeah,
Amos
David
over
Amos.
himself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know. So and then the lady you mentioned earlier, Coutinho.
Claire Coutinho.
Claire Coutinho. Again, very, very brave on this. So, Jack, I'm just going to say there are some good Tory MPs. There's a lot of stinking rotten ones. Suella Braverman's another good one. I know she was in power when the dreadful Afghan deal was done. But and this is another thing. That's why I say we need all the planets to align, because we need those Tory MPs either to come over to advance or some sort of pact be made where you say, well, I tell you what, if you're going to be on our side and you're going to follow these policies, we can live with you in Parliament, but you know, so we're not going to topple you, you know. And I'm speaking. I'm just a pleb in the very lowest rungs of advance. But I think those sort of discussions will probably need to be had on multiple levels if we want to do this, unite the right, and have a really good dig at winning this next election, whether it's with a coalition from Restore, Advance, a rump of Reform, UKIP, whatever, you know. Good Conservatives, there needs to be a real coming together where people are actually talking, saying it's not about we're putting country before party, whereas for years the Conservative Party put party before country, and you know, so anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. 13th of September, Howard.
Yeah.
Are you going to be there? Are you going to bring 1.5 million people from the?
Well, well, I will be sending out an email about 2 weeks beforehand to people, saying that I will be there. Yeah, try and keep me away from it. And you know, I don't know if I'm speaking or not, but I'm willingly to get up there and speak and so whoever is making that decision, I don't need more than about 5 minutes. But the most important thing, I think, what Tommy and the team need to show is the number of people that support him behind him. You know, it shouldn't be just the Tommy show; it should be the freedom of speech show. And if we get the right people talking, I know there are people coming in from the States, all around the world, etc. But we must have grassroots ground people who really do things here. Well, when those guys fly back, it's the people that matter, and that's the only thing Tommy's promoting, and I see Liam's promoting a few things like that. What's going on? Good luck. I'm all for it, but remember, it's the grassroots that will get.
Oh, I agree, and that's again, this is something that we've got to be very aware of. This is something that Reform have done very badly, is losing the grassroots. And my goodness, You know, we don't. We as the Unite the Kingdom movement do not need to lose the grassroots by just having the the rock star speakers on there. That, to be honest with you, a lot of the grassroots speakers, have a lot more passion and understanding of what's happening in the UK. And no, just Jordan Peterson's great. I met Jordan Peterson. He's really superb, and of course you want him speaking. But he is not on the ground in the UK knowing what's going on. So I totally agree with you on that, Howard. And again, we'll do the same with the pledge. We'll promote the 13th of September with the pledge to our. Do you know what? I'm getting mailing list envy here, Howard. I'm getting mailing list envy. Our little 60,000 mailing list, it feels so small compared with your 1.7 million.
But we've got to be realistic here, because people want me to fight on behalf of the motorists on motoring issues. They want me to stay out of politics, a lot of them. They just want me to fight on issues such as the cost of motoring. So I have to balance it very carefully, what I say and how I say it.
Yeah, no, exactly. And look, but believe you me, we got some blowback whenever we sent out an email promoting. Well, I got some blowback because I was answering all the emails whenever we promoted Advance on the pledge. But the thing is, I mean, the reality is, very senior people in Advance were the founders of the pledge, and so on and so. So, so I mean, to me, like, there's no conflict there. It's just. No. That is the party that has basically backed the pledge. Ben's publicly signed. I think you signed the pledge. I think, Howard, haven't you? I think you signed.
Yes,
yeah. So that was the whole thing with it. Well, listen, Howard, thank you so much for coming on. I think that was a brilliant stream. So, guys, in the comments, please share this everywhere, because I'd like to have got more people on it. Share this everywhere, because I think people need to see what Howard's about, see what Advance are about, see what Fair Fuel's about. And obviously, all about the pledge, because I waffle on about it every time we do it. Howard, thanks so much, guys. I'm sorry I didn't go into more of the comments, but I wanted to hear what Howard had to say, and basically give him free reign. We can maybe do a bit more of a Q&A next time he comes on. Howard, will you come back again? Because it's been a pleasure.
Well, try keeping me away, my good friend.
Brilliant. And again, I learned a lot tonight about the whole motoring side of things and the net zero side of things. Because I'm, again, we all have our own fields that we know quite a lot about, but you can't know everything about everything, can you?
Well, put it this way: the most important thing is we've got to actually get rid of Ed Miliband. That's the important one.
Well, and Keir Starmer and.
I think, Ed Miliband runs the cabinet, basically. They all support net zero. If we got rid of him, it would collapse, and Starmer would follow very quickly.
It would collapse. Well, that's what we need. Howard, thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of the evening. And guys, everyone that tuned in, thanks for watching. Please share this everywhere. And remember, sign the pledge, join Advance. I was going to say vote for Advance. You need to do that as well. And also fairfueluk.com. Yep.
Yes, please.
fairfueluk.com. Get on there and add to. We've only got 500, so if it goes up by 50, 10% would be good. If you get 50 people signing up,
I'll let you know, Richard.
Yeah, let me know. All right, Howard. See you soon. See you soon, everybody. Bye bye.